I'm Suzanne Sibilla. I'm the owner of Sibilla and Associates, which is the premier leadership and employee development company. Overcome obstacles, reframe your reality, love life, and have growth goals. Change and shift your energy. Pivot. Welcome, everyone. I'm Suzanne Sibilla, and I'm your host for Pivot Now, where we bring on exciting, interesting, and dynamic guests who will share with us their life and business pivots. You'll also gain tips, tricks, life and business hacks. I'm so excited to bring on this amazing guest today. She has over 30 years experience in the HR field, specifically in training, organizational change, and leadership. She is the CEO of Dynamism Leadership Company. So welcome to our show, Jeannie Morvatis Smith.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi,
Suzanne. Thanks for having me. I do need to just correct you, and that's part of setting boundaries. It's Jeannie Morvatis Smith, and so
I know we were practicing that before the show, and I'm like, okay, Morvatis.
And no worries whatsoever. A lot of people have a hard time with Morvatis, and they have a hard time with dynamism. But if you're not catching people and correcting them on your own name, you're not setting your boundaries the way that you should. And so I had to speak up.
Yeah, thank you again, Jeannie Morvatis.
You got it.
There you go.
Got it. Thanks for having me, Suzanne. This is my honor to be here.
Yeah, so glad you're here. So I know you were going to talk today to all of us about lead through connection. And before we do that, I'd like to get your backstory on how you pivoted in your life and business. What was your major pivots in your life and business?
So when you bring up both business and life, so business and personal, and what I'm loving about 2022 and beyond is people are just molding that into one. But back in the day, my biggest business pivot was when I went out on my own. So that was in 2005. I had climbed the corporate ladder from clerk to vice president of human resources. And I was always told that you had to be in-house where the employees were. You couldn't work remote. It's kind of funny now how we've evolved, but you can't work remote. You have to be here. You have to have FaceTime. And I really, really had this burning desire to create my own schedule, have more flexibility, and know that I could add more value to my clients if I had that balance. And so I was actually encouraged by one of my mentors to give it a try, go out on your own. So I did. That has to be my biggest pivot, because back then there weren't a lot of HR consultants going out on their own. They were, especially if you're leaving a corporate job like that at a high level, vice president. So I have to say my biggest pivot was going out on my own in business. My biggest personal pivot, which was, it kind of caught me off guard, was in a sense, but I actually am the one who initiated it, has to be my divorce. So I was married, and I thought for sure, for better, for worse, till death do us part. And he wasn't dying anytime soon. And I say that jokingly because we're still friends. His last name is Morvatis, so I've actually still used his name. Was to file for divorce and start a whole new life at 30. 31 it was, and that's really, really challenging. And you just have to realize that you can do anything you set your mind to. And even though it's difficult and it's challenging, if you break everything down into micro chunks, you can manage it. And when you succeed at that small little task, whatever it was, getting your name changed, and that's not an easy process by any means. And I did change it, by the way. And then and then celebrate those wins. But that has to be my biggest professional and personal pivot in life. And it was both of them were life-changing.
Wow, that's incredible. That really is incredible, Jeannie. I mean, especially to go, when you said that you went from a clerk to a VP status and then going out on your own business. I mean, that's really amazing. And then also going through a divorce. I know that can be very, very difficult and very challenging. And what kinds of obstacles were you faced with, and how did you overcome those obstacles?
Oh my gosh, there were so many obstacles. I'm going to touch on the personal one first, because people would say, oh my gosh, you're in your 30s and you don't have a child and you're going to be single. And, even some of my so-called friends were saying, but wait, our kids are going into kinder or what have you, and you don't have any kids. What are you, crazy? You're going to file for divorce and be out there in the dating world? Like, it's better than being in the situation I was in. So knowing who you are and your core values, you don't compromise those. So when they are being compromised, you have to put your foot in the ground and make the change that you need to, even if it's difficult. So you have to say, you know what, this doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, it's not. And you have to make the change. So that was a challenge, because people, even at work, were telling me, what are you, crazy? I can't believe you're getting a divorce. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be single and happy than married and not. And there was no way I was going to bring a child into an unhealthy marriage. So it was time to go out and be single. And I have to tell you, when you do things that support your core values and you make the best of it, it is pretty darn fun. I had a blast dating in my 30s. I was so much more wiser and, could make decisions and knew more about who I was than ever before. So as you see here, I have Smith now. So I remarried. We just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary, and we do have a 12-year-old son. And so I encourage everyone out there that it may not feel right at the time, or you may want to stay in a situation because everybody else is in that, you want to keep up with your friends, but do what's important to you. And what will work out for you will be so amazing afterwards. It won't feel like it at the time. And then business obstacles. Oh my gosh. Do we have like 5 hours or 5 days?
Talk, right?
5 days to talk about it. The biggest obstacle going out on your own is, for me, I'll never forget the feeling when I didn't have that direct deposit every Friday. Because you get so used to that. And at a certain level, it's significant money. And so all of a sudden, you're not getting that in the paycheck, in your direct deposit. What are you going to do? Well, you need to start doing some business development and get some so you can invoice. So that's like hello, you're now running a business. So that was just the reality of running a business. But there were a lot of challenges. Like you have to accept it's a numbers game, and you're going to get so many no's, and you can't take those no's personally. I mean, you have to go, okay, next. You can't be like, what did they like about me? And I think this is interesting, Suzanne, because I think, and why I led with the personal one, my personal experience of dating, I dated like 86 different dates before I met my husband. We laugh about him being number 86. It was a long period of time, like 6.5 years. It helped me in my business, because not everyone's going to love you. Not everyone's even going to like you. And that's okay. Because if you, back to the whole lead with connection, if you're connected to who you are and your core values, it doesn't matter. Do you like yourself? Do you love yourself? If you do, it doesn't matter. And you need to know, guess what, Jeannie? You didn't like all those dates. Guess what? You didn't like all those potential clients. It works both ways. So a no is not a bad thing. It's just say, hey, next, let's move on.
I love that, Jeannie. I really do. I mean, especially when you're talking about what is important to you in terms of your core values. I think that is so important for business and personal life, right? I mean, 100%. We have to be in alignment with what is important to us in terms of what our priorities are, what we truly value, because again, that steers us in the direction that aligns with our goals and everything. And you'll find that when you're in alignment with what is important to you, things start to fall into place. Like you'll get opportunities, meet people, for example, in your personal life, you'll get those opportunities coming to you because you're in alignment with what your priorities are, what your goals are, and what your values are. So I love that. I really love what you're talking about. I think that is so important.
100%. And when you're out of alignment, since you brought that word up,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to be things you're not, you're going to continue to hit those brick walls. And that it all, every leader that I work with, when they go, you know what, my team just doesn't really like me, or I just don't feel like I know them. Rather than start and say, well, how do you connect with them? I say, let's talk about this connection you have with yourself. Let's work on the internal Joe, Jeannie, Suzanne. And then we can talk about how you're presenting yourself as a leader in your organization. But it has to start there. And I have a values assessment that, I require everyone to start with that. And I have an energy leadership assessment. That's my next recommendation. And now we have some raw data to work with and say, okay, so how do you want to improve? And now, based on these years of experience, I can really see how you can go from here to here and build that better connection with your staff. And if you have that connection, they stick around. You're going to save money on retention. You're going to save money on poor employee engagement when you can start with yourself and that connection. So that's the starting point.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that when you talked about energy, because I read about your background that you use anabolic energy. So tell me a little bit more about that, what that means, and how do you do that? How do you focus that in with leaders?
Okay. So 2016, I decided to sign up for a certified coaching program. It was very extensive, 9 months, 300 and something hours worth of coursework in order to get certified. And it was Bruce Snyder is the founder of IPEC. And that was the program I went into. And he introduced me to energy leadership. And that's where I also got certified as an energy leadership master practitioner to administer and debrief the Energy Leadership Index assessment. And so this is where I have to say a huge, now that we're talking about pivoting, huge pivot in my life that I sometimes forget. I like put business, personal, but this is amazing because this actually brings the two together. So 2006, in order to be certified to administer the debriefs, I had to be debriefed by 5 different people on my assessment. So I had to take the assessment. 5 different coaching students had to debrief me. What an amazing, eye-opening experience. And I learned how to, let me back up. I learned what happened to me and the way I showed up when I felt stressed. And when I felt stressed, it was because my core values were being compromised. So what happens is thoughts or experiences come into your mind, and it's a natural reaction when you're stressed that it gets pushed down and you respond in a way like flight or fight. What do I got to do? Almost like victim. How do I have to survive this? But if you can control those thoughts and feelings, energy leadership comes into the thought feelings come in your mind, you quickly pause and identify, oh, I get it. That's for example, value of respect being compromised. Let me push it up to the front of my cortex up here in my brain. And now I'm going to make a decision to respond versus react. Within seconds, it changes the dynamic of any meeting. It changes the way that leaders show up in the hallway. Like I used to have a leader that would walk around, and I'm going to date myself, with his BlackBerry. So let me get the little pointer. He'd walk around with his head down on his BlackBerry, right? And he told me, I was actually assigned to him to coach his leadership style. And this was way back when. And they said, he felt his team didn't like him. And I said, you know what? Your team doesn't know you, because let me observe you for a week. And he'd be walking around. So a better approach, rather than so people were afraid to interrupt him because he's so busy on his BlackBerry, like we are today on our phones. I go, why don't you leave that at your desk when you go walk down the hall to the restroom or walk to get coffee? Why don't you make a detour past your staff and give them a little bit of time and get to know them? So I'm getting sidetracked on getting to know people and making that connection, but really think about how you can show up differently So if like that person, that director that I was talking about, he was stressed, so he's on his pad. What if he were to put that down, take a deep breath and say, you know what? I'm going to get back to that because that doesn't matter. Right now, I'm going to just walk to get some coffee, and whoever comes my way, I'm going to show up in a positive manner. So, hi, Suzanne. How's the dog? I know you just got a puppy over the weekend. That takes 2 seconds, right? Hey, Jeannie, how's it going? Good job on that project you worked on. Takes seconds. But rather than being like, don't interrupt me, I'm stressed, that gets pushed down, right? So that's a whole, in a nutshell, what energy leadership is and how we can identify the stressors in our life that compromise our core values and cause us to react versus respond. And you can take charge of the amygdala and make a difference with every single interaction, whether it be with somebody in front of you in a car that's going so slow. What if you think about, oh my God, what if they're bringing someone home from the hospital? What if they're carrying a wedding cake in the back? Why am I so stressed out to hurry and get there? Let them have their time. There's just a whole nother way of thinking. And you can diffuse the stress.
I think that is so true. I mean, I work with a lot of clients where, we talk about what your thoughts are and how your thoughts impact your behaviors and also your emotions, and that ultimately impact the results. So if you want different results in your life, you have to look at what your thoughts are behind that, because we go through 60,000 thoughts in a day, and many of those thoughts, 90% of those thoughts are negative. So I like what you're saying, that we have to examine our thoughts throughout the day and think, like you're saying, if you're driving the car, you may not know that person that's in the other car is, like you're saying, maybe going to the hospital. You don't know, you don't know what's going on in people's lives unless you actually connect with them. You actually find out and understand what's going on. It kind of brings me back to a point too, I think, back in the day, about leading through walking around, or managing through walking around. That was such a big thing. And I think it still is a big thing to really get to know your team, get to know your staff, is by interacting with them. And I know with regards to, 2020, with all these Zoom meetings and Zoom calls, I'm wondering now, how can we interact with our team, if you will, because we're now all on Zoom, if you will. And a lot of us are going back into companies in person. Do you have any tips for us for that?
Absolutely. If you haven't in the last 2 years been having one-on-one time with your staff, so scheduled one-on-one meetings on a regular basis, it's on the calendar, you know when to expect it, they know when to expect it, and then have an agenda for the meeting and have the first however many minutes you and your employee need for whatever they want to talk about, whatever they want to bring up. And it doesn't need to be just about work. Picture yourself as a leader who wants to get to know them as a whole. Because as I've mentioned throughout the last couple minutes that we've been talking, it used to be personal and it used to be business, and now it's just blending. It's just blending as one. And I call them the newbies, or the more green folks coming into the work world. That's all they know. And so you need, and I highly, highly recommend to leaders, ask your staff, what do you need from me? Work on the agenda together. It doesn't have to be the leader's opinion of how it should be. So I want to meet with you. I think a half an hour every Tuesday at 9 would work. What do you think? And the employee might, maybe last time the 30 minutes was enough. Can we do 40 minutes? Absolutely. Let's start there and see if that works, if it's too much time or not. And we don't have to stay in the meeting if we're done with what we need to talk about. But then you have that 40 minutes. In the beauty of having that on the calendar is you get less interruptions, because employees save it for their meeting. And then ask questions of your staff, open-ended questions. Like, I have a whole list here. Like, what do you think the problem is with that project? What do you think it is? And then sit back, leaders, sit back with both ears and zip your one mouth and listen twice as much as you talk. So many leaders want to fill that, and they want to answer the question. Why even answer the question? Or they ask questions that are not open-ended, like with a yes or no answer. Then guess what? The conversation stops. So
Mm-hmm.
sit back, listen to what they have to say, then ask some more probing questions to drill down to what the problem really is. Keep asking questions until you figure it out. And then continually offer up your service. Like I've been hearing lately this servant leadership all over again. I'm like, this is from the
Mm.
80s and 90s.
Yep.
Bringing it back. I think they need
Uh-huh.
to, but people are introducing it right now as if it's a novel concept. And I'm like, there's books and books on my bookshelf on servant leadership. You sit back as a true leader and ask them, what do you need from me? What obstacles can I get out of your way so you can be successful? Let's talk about, phase B of the project last week. What happened that you think when we repeat it this week, if I got involved, would make a difference? Intercept yourself where that employee needs you. And that's showing up as a coach.
Yeah, again, I love what you're saying. Again, listening is so important. And as you said, servant leadership. I mean, that, again, I recall that too, back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And now it's coming back full force, is really about how we can serve others in our leadership role and really find out what is the problem going on here. Many times as leaders, we want to just like, okay, what are they saying? I'm going to have a response. And not just leaders, but as we're talking in conversation, it might be like, okay, how am I going to respond to this person? And thinking about what I'm going to say versus really paying attention and really being present and really listening to what they're saying and then have a response, right? So I love what you just said now.
I'm laughing because I agree with you 100%. And that's not why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because how many times, and I'm going to speak for me as a woman in business. How many times have I said, oh, I got a good idea. What if we did this, this, and that? Silence. And then it's like, Joe, I got an idea, this, and that. Great idea, Joe. And I'm like, I'm sorry, didn't I just say that? So were you really listening to everyone? It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what gender they are today. Like, just listen to everyone. You'll be amazed at what they're able to contribute. And what I tell leaders all the time, you hired them for a reason. They still have that knowledge, skills, and abilities. They still can add that value. Let them shine. Empower them. So don't micromanage. And what you were saying was, don't be thinking about your next question or how you're going to answer. Bingo. That is the number one issue. You cannot be fully listening if you are, what do they call it? Multitasking and thinking what you're going to respond. If you practice being 100% present, like right now, I'm listening to what Suzanne is saying and I'm waiting. And then what comes to my mind, right? I'm not trying to think of the next thing. And the beauty of that is you're fully present, you're listening. And guess what? They feel it. They know it. They know when you're not. And that's really the difference, the connection piece. You're showing up, you're telling me that I'm important enough for you to listen to me. Huge, simple, but not easy all the time. You have to practice it and make it a habit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this calls for, I mean, in terms of as a leader within businesses, as a leader within one's family, right? I mean, to be truly present with one's kids, that's absolutely amazing as well, right? Because a lot of times we're thinking like, oh gosh, what did you do yesterday? Or we got a plan for tomorrow or this week. And we're always thinking like in the past or maybe in the future. To be really, truly present for the now, that can be really challenging. That can be really challenging at times.
But think about it as a parent, it's life-changing for your child. And since you brought that up, so both my parents have passed away now. My father was like Disneyland dad, super fun, but he also liked Star Trek, right? So when Star Trek was on, it'd be like, Jeannie, wait for the commercial. Well, what happened is I stopped sharing my excitement with dad because I didn't want to be put off till the commercial. So my mom would be like, come on. And we'd go in the back room and she would just like literally pin her hair back, open her ears like Dumbo and listen until I stopped talking. Like it didn't matter. What a difference in the relationship that I have. The same thing happens in the work world. And you know what? I still think about that because clearly it had an impact on me. And that was the original Star Trek. You know how long ago that was. But it was like, do not put people off for a commercial till the commercial. When people, especially your children, if they have something to tell you, you drop what you're doing. That is the most important thing. And people will challenge me on that because they'll say, well, you need to have your boundaries. Yes, you've already set your boundaries. So my son knows, you know, if the door's closed and you hear me in a call, you do not interrupt. So what I'm teaching him is respect, but I also am showing that I value him and respect him too. And so be there for your kids. And it is hard, but you know what? It's going to make a difference in the long run.
Yeah, I love that too, especially with kids, you know, as you're teaching them respect, like you said with your son, you know, when the door is closed, that shows that, okay, I'm having a private conversation, don't interrupt, and you're teaching them boundaries as well. And that goes true for leading in organizations, right? Setting boundaries as well in organizations as well. So I love what you said, and also your example in terms of your story about, you know, Disneyland dad and that your mom was wide open in terms of her, you know, listening. And like it did make a huge impact.
That's actually interesting because I never even thought I never thought about the way that I just said it because I've never said it that way. Disneyland dad, but mom was Dumbo with open ears. Like Dumbo is Disney, right? Like how hilarious.
Yeah.
The other thing with work and home is to communicate your expectations. So to my son, here's my plan for the day. I'm going to be doing this, which means I need you to do this during this time. When we're done, we're going to go do this together at work. So employees, here's the plan. I'm under it's going to be tough to meet these deadlines. It means I'm going to be working 12-hour days. There'll be times where my door's closed. Know that you can still text me and I will respond and I'll open the door when I can have you come in. But in order for me to be successful, I need to do this, this, and this. So do I have your support? What that also means is I'm going to need you on this day, and this day. So please be ready and respect their time. So don't just call them in blind, you know, without giving them a heads up. Like nobody wants to be surprised about anything. That's a big thing because people and children don't want to be like, hey, can you see me? Come see me for a minute. You know, that's a whole thing. That walk of shame into the manager's office, or it used to be walk of shame into HR. Am I going to get fired? You know, here's your box on the way out. So it's like communicate all the time. It's okay. And that is the biggest problem in the work world today. Lack of communication in any time, ever. Communication, lack of communication. Don't just tell them when things are going great. Don't just always be the Disneyland leader. Maybe you also need to be the tough love leader. Never thought about that way either. But maybe
that is really excellent. I think too is setting the level of expectations, because I coach a lot of, you know, professionals in business and such, and a lot of times there's a miscommunication because expectations weren't communicated. Like I didn't, you know, they don't show or tell what is expected of their employee, like how to be, how to act, what to do, you know, in the work world, so to speak, or what projects are expected of them, what their deadlines are. And so the employee's like, I don't know what to do, or they're kind of hit and miss type of thing. And so I love that you're saying that setting the level of expectation is really important in communicating that. Personal life as well as professional life.
You know, in the work world, I've had leaders say, I'm like, well, did you tell them that? Did you lay out the expectations? Did you tell them what the end goal looks like? Well, no, they should know that. Didn't they go to Harvard? You know, they throw like comments like that. I said, okay, we can never assume people know unless you personally told them. And if you told them and you told them and you told them, then, you know, now we know where maybe the issue is. They're not listening. So what I've coached a lot of people on is, you know what, Suzanne, I have this project for you, and I think you're the best person for it because you're experienced doing this, this, and this, and this. When I did it 5 years ago, this is what the end result looked like. Now, we don't have to do it my way, because I know you know more than I do about this. So what we're going to do, this is how I think it should work. What input do you have? So we lay it all out, the plan. And then as a leader, you poke holes in the process and you peer in, open it up and be like, we might be going the wrong path. We might not. You can do those in one-on-one, your weekly one-on-ones, by asking questions. How's it going? We talked about this being week 3 and you should be here. What obstacles are in your way that I can remove? What's holding you up from doing that? Is there anything? And the beauty of this type of interaction and communicating expectations is that employee feels so comfortable with you that along the way, they're going to go, oh crap, I screwed up. I totally made the wrong mistake. I wasn't thinking. I didn't sleep last night. I made this big mistake, but they're going to catch it, come in with 3 solutions and communicate the solutions. And I'll tell you, that happened to me. It happened to me. I messed up big. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I came in with 3 solutions and they were all better than the first original plan. But I had to recognize that. So, and when you don't have this type of relationship and connection, you know what happens? The employee tries to cover it up. They're like a dog that throws dirt over it. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And by the time down here, you can't even recover financially from that mistake. So you have to poke holes and see how it's going in there. And I use that example because it's easy to remember. Explain where the expectations, the end goal, get their buy-in along the way, check and balance, peek in, see where it's wrong, and coach through where they could improve. That's a true coaching leader.
Yeah, that's a great model. Definitely a great model. Love it. So I'm wondering, can you give us, we call it the 3-2-1. So 3 tips, 2 techniques, and 1 action item that we can take to move us forward, to pivot in our life. Again, 3 tips, 2 techniques, and 1 action item to pivot in our life.
So 3 tips. Pause. It is number 1, perfectly okay to pause anytime you need to, anytime. If it's an interview, I talk about this in Interviewing 101. You don't know the answer, or you need to think about the answer. Suzanne, that's a great question. Can you just give me a minute? I need to think about it. What that does is an example, it tells the interviewer that you're not going to be spouting stuff out of your mouth left and right, that you're actually going to think about your solution before saying it. That's huge. So pause. Pause when you need time. Like, for example, the CEO, like, you know what? I don't have all that research done. And you just caught me in the hallway, and we actually talked about having it done by Friday, but what if I have it done by Thursday at noon? Like, give me a little bit of my time. I need to think about it a little bit more. Same thing as the interview, right? Buy yourself some time, and it's okay. Nobody expects you to respond immediately. The expectation is on ourselves. We think we have to be superstars and we have to respond, and I got to show them I'm super smart. You know what? Nobody expects that of you. So give yourself some grace and don't have such high expectations. And I'm all about high expectations. I was like Wonder Woman all the way. But I need to tell you, like, give yourself some grace and don't be so hard, and buy yourself some time. And not in a negative way. I don't say that in a negative way. It's so that you're presenting the best part that you can. So pause. Also, the same thing with your thoughts coming in. Pause. What value is being compromised? How can I respond versus react right now? What is happening? Am I stressed? Why am I stressed? Do one of those, the evaluation of the assessment that I have on energy leadership, and you'll really see what happens, why you're triggered. It has a lot to do with who we are and what we've been told to do up until now. So the second thing, I might have already touched on it, is pinpoint what values are being compromised. So pause, pinpoint, figure out what's happening right here and now, and identify that. Call out the feelings, call out the emotions. You don't need to spend hours doing this. You can do this within seconds with the right techniques. And then the third thing, and perfect for your show, is pivot how you're going to respond. What are you going to do now? Like, figure it out. And there's always, there's that saying, everything is figure outable. 100%. You just have to give yourself the time to figure it out. And it's okay. Where we make mistakes, and I've already said it, is when we feel we need to respond immediately, when you just don't. So you can just wait it out. And then what is the best decision for me based on who I am? And that's what's so hard, right? Like you started the show, like, where did you pivot? Like, how do I know I'm ready to file for divorce? How do I know that I'm ready to go out on my own? Well, when your values are no longer being supported in the situation you're in, you have to make the change. So pause, pinpoint, identify what it is, and pivot.
Excellent tips. Thank you for that. Yeah, I like the whole thing about pausing too. I don't know if you ever saw, the Mr. Bean show, because he would be silent and then he became like president or something. Then he was silent. A lot of times he would do the pause, right? And people were like, oh, wow, he must know what's going on. He must be really important. He must really know things, because a lot of times he wouldn't react to things. He would be silent. And I thought, I don't know, I just thought of that, that whole show, because a lot of times, that could be our tendency, is like we want to react. We just want to say things. We want to fill the air instead of, like you said, pause, take a pause.
And you just brought up that example. And I remember being in meetings, and the person who was viewed as the wisest was the one who said the least. They would be like, here's the flapper, right? Usually, I'm not going to stereotype, but usually like the head of sales, just talking a whole mean game of stuff that you're like, I don't even know what he's talking about. Just talking to talk, just to fill the gap, definitely not pausing. And anyway, that was some of my experience. And then you had the wise, like not old, but the wise owl. And they would wait and they'd say, so like, Nick, what do you think? And he'd go, well, in my observation, and then boom. And you're just like, he's blown everybody away. Right? That's a great example.
Yep.
It's a great example of pausing. Everything we've already said, truly listening, being 100% present in what you're doing, and then responding versus reacting. And you can do this in everything you do. And I have to tell you, it is life-changing. It changed my life when I figured this out, 2016. And I was like, you know what? You can be fully in charge of what comes in and how you respond.
So true. So true. You can. I mean, I deal with so many clients where they think, oh, I can't manage my emotions. I just feel this way. I feel sad. I feel anxious. I feel depressed. I'm like, no, you can actually manage your emotions by the thoughts that you have.
Yeah.
And that's very eye-opening for many people, is that you can manage your thoughts and your emotions and your actions, and you'll get different results by managing those thoughts.
And your stress level will be fully reduced.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing. It is amazing.
It's an amazing technique, which brings us to the 2 techniques. So can you tell us a little bit more about 2 techniques that you would use in terms of pivoting in life or business?
It's a lot of what I've already said, is understanding who you are at the core, really taking a deep breath. It could be any time, like somebody crashes into your car. I don't know why I keep using the car example. And you take a deep breath, I'm still alive. It's not that big a deal. It's just a car. Like, it's all how you think about things. So make sure. So I'm looking back at like my major pivots were, divorce and going out on my own and running my own business. And if you don't know what is important to you and what makes you tick and what ticks you off, you're never going to know if you got there. And so I really think it's important to breathe, take time, whatever it is. If you journal, if you get a coach, if you have a therapist, whoever you have, you need someone to bounce ideas off of, and someone who will challenge you and be an accountability partner. I think that that is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And all continuing to continue to visit, pausing along the way to visit your efforts and then celebrate those efforts, right? It's so important. And when you've and don't forget your intuition. There are people who have high intuition and some not as much, but you know what? Your gut will never lie to you. So if something doesn't feel right, it is not right. So you don't have to figure it out, but you can figure out what is going to be right. And that's based on your core values. So I recommend everybody starts there. Figure out who you are at the core. And it's perfectly okay to pivot from where you are if what you're doing isn't supporting you. It could be a job, it could be a marriage, it could be a general location. You know, I live in San Diego, but in California. And if this wasn't working for me anymore, it's okay. It's okay to make changes. And we, again, back to what I said earlier, we have these expectations of ourselves that you really don't have to do that. You know, you might have set that up and at the time it was the right decision at the time, but times have changed. So check in with yourself constantly. And that's the breathe and like give yourself a moment of like people meditate, whatever works for you to check in. How am I feeling? What am I thinking? How is this serving me? Why am I doing this? And then set up how you're going to make the changes to support it if what you're doing isn't supporting your core values.
Again, I think that is so, so important. I coach a lot of clients that, they went to school, they got their bachelor's degree, they maybe got their, MBA degree, and then they're in a company that they feel like it's not a good fit for them. And I always tell them, if it's not a good fit and you feel it and you know it, get out, like do something, take a plan, make a strategy, and do something about it. You don't need to be stuck in there, right? And then a lot of times you're like, but I went to school for all these years and, this was my whole thing that I was going to do this. And things change, right? Things change, you change. I mean, we all change, right? So it is about pivoting and learning and knowing what your core values are. What is important to you? What are your priorities?
And who you are today, what your priorities are today.
Exactly.
We do have to plan, but do you know that statistically people changed their career 3 times?
Yep.
When I heard that, I'm like, oh, I've been in HR way too long, but that's maybe I did change quite a bit, but you know what? 3 times in their career. So those clients of yours, absolutely. You know what? It's okay. You can use those skills and the experience elsewhere.
Exactly.
So think about that's probably what you do. Think about where you can add value and from your experiences, and this can apply here, and you could do something that you like. And
right. And it's not like you're starting over. A lot of times I hear that from people like, oh, I feel like I'm starting from the beginning or I'm starting over. It's like, no, you're starting from experience.
Yes.
Experience, right?
Totally.
You're not starting over. You have all this experience, this knowledge that you're bringing in to the new organization, the new company. Yes. That's what you're bringing in. You're bringing in experience. You're not starting over. So I think, again, it's a shift in perspective, a shift in the mind, in the thought process, if you will.
Totally. And people should not give up on their dreams. And if their dreams change, that's really good because you're growing. We all change. They say that people do not become, I guess, they become the most confident self at age 60.
Wow.
So it's like, you know what? It's okay to make these changes along the way. Do I want to do what I was doing in my 20s and 30s? No. So it's like, we need to accept that. And life is so short. If the last 2 or 3 years haven't like showcased that, I don't know what has. And you just have today. So what did you do today that you enjoyed? You have to really have a good time doing it. And that there's always parts of our job that, yeah, I do this part. It's not that fascinating to me, but you do it so that this part that you love, you can do. And that saying, when you do something you love, it's not really work, you
Yeah.
love it. You love it.
Yeah, which brings us to the next part of this segment is really, I love us to focus in on focus fun, really, and focus favorites, what we call this part of the show is focus favorites, because I believe that a lot of times we feel overwhelmed or we feel like we're in a transition and we're in a lot of changes. If we focus on what we enjoy, if we focus on what adds value to us, if we focus on what's fun for us, a lot of times those transitions become smoother, if you will. They won't be so overwhelming. They won't be so stressed out. So I'd like to ask you some questions on what is your favorite fun activity that you like? What's your favorite fun?
During the pandemic, I picked up paddleboarding in 2020, and I absolutely love to paddleboard. And in San Diego, we have a lot of bodies of water, and so that makes it really convenient for me. So I love paddleboarding. I also love like hanging out with my boxer, my dog Rosie. She's talk about unconditional love. So those are fun. Of course, my family. There's more than one. There's a ton more.
And what about
getting outdoors?
Fitness. What about favorite fitness?
Well, paddleboarding is very good, but I also have we just remodeled, so I have a gym in my house, and so
that's great.
The bike is great, the treadmill's great. There's all kinds of exercises you can do. Yoga is awesome. Pilates is awesome.
Favorite food?
Favorite food? I like fish. I like fish.
Okay.
It's so like salmon. Salmon is amazing. So I like fish.
Favorite film?
Oh my goodness. So I'll tell you what's a little crazy. And I don't know about my favorite one, but we just started watching Squid Games. It's called Squid Games.
Okay.
Wow. That's interesting, but it's kind of fun. My husband and I sometimes like to just veg out and do the Netflix binge. So, but I don't have a favorite film. I really don't. There's so many. Like I often I think it was called A Few Good Men, and it had Jack Nicholson in it. And I often reference that when I'm like, you know that saying when Jack Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." I believe it was in that show, that movie. I say that a lot because some leaders want their staff. The staff feels that the leader wants them to tell them what they want to hear. In the reality, they need to hear the truth. So I often refer to that one.
Yeah. So do you have any closing remarks or comments? And what action can we take in our lives and business to move us forward?
So I mentioned it earlier. Don't give up on your dreams. If you really have a burning desire to do something, break it down into achievable chunks, goals. And even break that down even into tasks. What can I get done today? Like 3 things you can do today to move your business forward or move closer to your goal. And then celebrate those little mini wins. Because when you celebrate, you're honoring the hard work that you did. And a lot of us overachievers wait till the end. But I've learned if you celebrate along the way, whatever that means to you, go for an extra long run or whatever it is that you want to do. Go do that. Or if you finish early that day, go paddleboarding, which is super great. San Diego's weather is amazing. And then know that you can achieve anything and everything you set your mind to. And a lot of people say, I can't do that. I'm too old. I can't do that because I didn't go to school. I can't do that because they're comparing themselves to other people. The number one advice I can give you is compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That's it. That's it. And if you're moving in the right direction, you've grown just a little bit more based on whatever you experienced today. And embrace those moments. Like we talked about being fully present. When you're fully present, you learn all day long. It's amazing what happens when you're fully present. So compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That's it. All this social media gets people in a complete whole nother world comparing themselves to these influencers. Don't do that. Do yourself a favor and remember just compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
Love it, love it, love it, Jeannie. That is so, so, so true and so amazing. Yeah, because a lot of times we can compare ourselves to people's highlight reels, right? On Instagram or, on the social media. And we think, oh, wow, they're having a fabulous life. They're doing all these things. And that's their highlight reel. We don't know what's going on in their personal life or in their business life, really. So again, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Love that entirely. That is so true. And because again, you're growing. If you were not the same person that you were yesterday, you are taking growth, you are growing. So that's excellent, excellent advice. Thank you.
Envision yourself like Yoda. You know what? In the end, I see myself rocking on a rocking chair on a deck, a front deck of some amazing house. And kids, the neighborhood kids are like, I don't know, let's go ask Jeannie. Let's go ask Jeannie. She lived a fulfilled life because she was present when she was with everyone, and she learned something from every single interaction she had. So be like Yoda.
I love it. Be like Yoda. So cool. That is so great. And where can we find you? We will have your social media contacts and everything at the end of this, and you can find Jeannie. If you can tell us where we can find you as well, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's probably best just to go to the website. It's Dynamism, so DYNAMISM leadership.com. And we have all the connections to all of the different social medias on there. You can also schedule a call with me directly from the site.
That's great, Jeannie. Thank you so much for being on our show. We really appreciate it. You gave tremendous advice, tremendous value to our audience. Again, thank you so much for your time and for your tips and techniques and action items. So we need to take those actions moving forward. Thank you so much.
Oh, Suzanne, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Change and shift your energy. Pivot